To get started here, this is a picture of the front of Park Slope. It used to be just one little building, and it had like an overhead here, and they've expanded in recent years to take up two other buildings on either side of them. So they've got like 6,000 square feet of store selling space at this point. That doesn't include basement and storage and all that. But anyway, it's located in the Park Slope area, neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, and it had its 35th birthday just a few days after I got there. And it's the largest member-owned, member-run co-op in the United States. It has over 14,000 member owners who exchange approximately 2.75 hours a month to be able to shop here. And what they get in return, basically, is about 20 to 40% off on their groceries. The markup at Park Slope is 21%, and as we go on, I can speak a little bit more to what that actually means in comparison to other places. They have over 200 varieties of organically and conventionally grown produce and over 8,000 other products. This is a place that if you walk into it, you see that they have made use of every inch of their 6,000 square foot space. But it's way more than just a place to buy groceries. And we've got actually a person here today who's a member at our co-op and the Park Slope co-op. And maybe Carol, when we do our questions and answer period, can speak to some of that.
Dual citizenship.
Yeah, dual citizenship. Brooklyn, New York, Missoula, Montana. Well, I think I would like this to be our sister co-op here. Maybe be their sister city. Anyway, it's a community icon, and I'll speak more to that too as we move on. But let me just say that what I'm going to do with this presentation is provide you with a context. So before we get into Brooklyn, New York, I want to provide a context for people that will give you an understanding of what co-ops are all about and why co-ops, a little bit about the history and such. So that's where I want to start. And maybe that takes about 20 minutes of this, but I think it's important. What I did was I found all kinds of little logos from different kinds of cooperative efforts. And I'm not sure how many of you have ever heard of Mondragon, which is in the Basque region in Spain. But it's a workers' co-op like no other workers' co-op in the entire world. They're located now in 21 countries. They have over 70,000 people who work as owners and workers in this incredible action that's been studied, time and time again to find out what its successes were. But that's just one example. And so what you get a sense of when you start to look at these logos is that it's not just about food co-ops, it's about cooperative business arrangements in so many different kinds of sectors of the world or of our economy. I put one there for the Grange movement, which I remember so well, being a farm kid and being connected to the Granges, and then I just threw this in to just sort of pique your curiosity about what I might be talking about next. So I won't get too political today, though. Yeah. Anyway, so what is a cooperative? A cooperative is a private business organization structured very, very differently from what we generally think of as corporate business. They're incorporated under state law. They're formed to meet, though, the specific objectives of their members, which is really quite different than how other businesses get started. Usually other businesses get started because a business person or a small group of people want to get that going. It doesn't necessarily have much to do with the objectives of people who might be consumers, etc. And I think this is a really important point, is that they're structured to adapt to members' changing needs. So what you see with co-ops is that they're extremely fluid. And what you'll see with, for example, Park Slope, after 35 years of layer upon layer upon layer of policies and procedures that have developed all around the whole issue of continually trying to adapt to its members' needs. So that's the difference. There are about 40,000 in the United States. Of all the US population, probably about a quarter of people have some connection to a co-op, either through credit unions, those are the big ones, and then through food co-ops. And they exist in a large number of sectors of the economy, and the bottom line, though, really, and it's a whole different value principle. It sort of turns capitalism, the way we think of capitalism and the free market, on its ear, and we're thinking then more about distributing goods and services more equitably, which we are led to believe that the free market should do that, but in actuality, when it plays out, it doesn't usually work that way. I think the major point with co-ops is that they're really about alternative economic structures. They're an alternative to what we generally see in the free market. Put that in quote, because that free market really costs us a whole lot in many ways. And so they're a real challenge to, and historically they've been a challenge to, assumptions about that competition always keeps prices in balance. I mean, think about this. Does competition keep prices in balance? And it's a challenge to this whole idea that free market forces, if left unchecked, meaning unregulated, will bring equity to all involved. Do we know that? Has that played out? And it's a challenge to the whole idea that we can grow our way out of poverty. That if we can just keep expanding our economy, that eventually we'll grow our way out of poverty. So cooperatives have always challenged those notions of free market capitalism. And so in a sense, they're a form of resistance against the dominant economic corporate model that values capital gains for a few. And they also challenge the whole idea about labor and what labor and work mean. And instead of seeing labor as a commodity, something that at this point many corporations are going to other countries to get at the cheapest possible cost, labor is looked at as a way to cooperate, a way to take responsibility, a way to be part of a group cause. It's a totally different way. Again, it turns the whole notion of labor on its ear as well. And I found this, and it just fascinates me, and I wish I could somehow find an original so I could actually see what the date is, but I'm thinking that the date on this is either late 1800s, early 1900s, and from where you're sitting, if you can't read this, what it says is capitalism, we rule, we fool you, we rule you, we fool you, we shoot at you, we eat for you, and then this says we feed all, and we work for all. Yeah. And so I think, I mean, that just fascinated me. Just totally fascinated me. Again, it's a way to move away. What it does is it challenges us to think about, you know, the whole carrot and the stick way of that we operate, you know, with labor and with business, I think. A quote I thought was interesting. One can discern in evolution a repeating pattern in which aggressive competition leads to a threat of extinction, which is then avoided by the formation of cooperative alliance. Something to think about. And then this, yeah, it's better on this screen. On my screen at home, it cut it off too, but that says consumer over here, and then producer here. And I found this old book, and it was like written in 1975, and it was about how to start a food co-op. So it's almost ancient at this point, right? And that was in the day too that, you know, everybody was starting food co-ops, so they actually had a manual for how to do it. And this guy did this nice chart, which I kind of tried to copy and replicate here, but it does, I mean, say a lot in a visual here. In essence, what co-ops are trying to do is decrease the distance between people who produce goods and people who buy goods. And by doing that, you know, they detour around the whole profit system. That's, I mean, ideally, that's the push. is to detour around that profit system. And I'd have to say that no one does it quite so well, at least at this point that I've seen, as Park Slope Food Co-op. So it's a great model to be presenting on today. And very briefly about cooperative history, and cooperatives have been around, of course, since the beginning of time. I mean, in the beginning of people, where people learn that sometimes the best way to really make things happen is for a group of people to get together and for those people to actually work together on something. And more formally, though, co-ops started around mid-1700s in Europe. And historically what you see, and I think we're seeing this now, is that co-ops sort of have these waves of development, and they really coincide with what's happening with the broader economy. So if there are all kinds of painful, stressful, chaotic things happening with the economy that aren't really very favorable to common people, to working class people, then what you'll generally see is the people are going to resist that, and they're going to form together to create something that works more for them. And so that's really been the history. And probably the longest running co-op has been the one that formed in Rochdale in 1844 by a group of 28 people who were weavers. And again, the economy was horrid at the time. They band together, they actually formed their own store. They formed a place where they could buy all their own weaving equipment at less cost. People were finding too at the time that, you know, I'm thinking of miners because I'm thinking of Butte and Anaconda Mining Company, and how all these huge corporations had stores where their employees basically had to buy their food. But what they did was they adulterated that food. Like they put plaster into the flour, they put rocks in the peas, and so when you weighed things out, they were getting gypped basically. And the company that was their employer were the ones who were really taking people for a ride. And so knowing that, what happened was people started to say, well, we don't have to tolerate this. We can form our own thing, and we can get food that's better quality at a much lower price. So that's historically what you see happening. But there were co-ops around farming, way early, farming co-ops. It kind of coincided with the utopians. I'm getting off to my little history stuff that I love, but the utopians back in the 1800s who were thinking that we could really have a better world, well, many of them started to form communes where they did cooperative farming and those sorts of things. And a lot of it didn't work. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a list of things that folks have found through research that contributes to why things fail that are cooperative efforts and what makes them thrive. So we'll get to that part too. But anyway, this is, oh, Ben Franklin. You know, that was kind of news to me that he was one of the first people to actually get a co-op going. And it was an insurance co-op so that some business people could indemnify themselves. And that's the Rochdale group, the men from way back when who started and it ended up being called the Rochdale Pioneer Society. There's still a museum there. This co-op still continues. And they've replicated some things, and this is what their old story used to look like. What?
I was going to say. We've moved up.
That looks familiar, doesn't it? I should have got the picture where we started, right next to the car.
I'm Terry Merriman. That's Terry with a Y, and Merriman is M-E-R-R-I-M-A-N.
Cool. And Terry, what brought you to this presentation today?
Well, my wife was a presenter, so I wanted to come and listen to her presentation.
For sure. Yeah. And what was the thing that you sort of found most interesting, or one thing that stuck out to you about the presentation?
Well, I just, Maxine is so enthusiastic about research, and in this particular this particular area of food insecurity research and exploring the co-ops. She was so enthused to go back east, and it seemed like such an exciting project that I just wanted to see how she put it all together. And I thought it was just fascinating because the amount of research involved was monumental, and the fact that she went in and delved into the history of all cooperatives just to bring this presentation up to steam. I just found it fascinating. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
And the last question is, what's your favorite co-op food?
Well, actually, I think we're really liking the buffalo burger. Yeah, been eating a lot of that.
Nice. Cool. Thank you.
Of co-ops, that there are corporate people who fight tooth and nail against having any of that legislation passed because of how it would hurt their own interests. So that's a whole interesting area to start to think about. But this is, I love this sign. It says cooperating out of poverty. I just love that. Anyway, this is basically what the goals of the co-op movement were, still are in some ways, but it was really all about protecting workers and consumers, farmers and producers, and it was also about, and I think we have to try not to forget this piece, that it was about eliminating poverty and wage slavery and deteriorating urban conditions. And then it was, and I think is a phenomenal way for us to really start to think about how you translate democratic principles into work, into business. Because I think it's, and you know, I think Joe Holtz, who's the person who's been at Park Slope for 35 years, would say, it's real messy and it's not easy. None of this is easy. When you choose to go this route, it's the harder route to go. It's the more complicated way to go. But I think it has more transformative potential than anything else. So these principles, what's amazing about them is the Rochdale guys, back in the couple of photos ago, they're the ones who originally developed these principles. They've been modified somewhat, they've been amended somewhat over how many years has that been, but primarily they've stayed the same. So, I mean, that's interesting to think about. So this first principle speaks for itself because it's important to know that, and I think I already said this, that every year corporations in the bank community introduce bills into the federal and state legislature attempting to curtail cooperatives, especially credit unions, for what they say is unfair advantages in pricing and market appeal. And that's good to know. The second principle ensures that no member has a greater voice in the operation of the cooperative than any other member. One share, one member, one vote. The third principle, members contribute equitably to and democratically control the capital of the co-op. And 4, autonomy and independence. Co-ops are autonomous. They're self-help organizations controlled by their members. And number 5, cooperatives provide education and training for their members so they can contribute effectively to the development of the cooperative. They inform the general public, particularly young people and opinion leaders, about the nature and benefits of the co-op. And you know, when I started to do some more thinking about that one, and what makes so much sense about that being one of the principles is that if you think about primarily how we're raised in this country or many other countries, that we're not necessarily raised to be cooperative. We're raised really to be competitive. And so the whole philosophy about cooperation is it's something that we need to talk about and educate people about. And there are ways that it can work, and there are ways, like I said, where it will fail unless you bring the right kind of skills into how to do cooperation. Because it's not anything that I think we may all know just naturally, given what our training's been. And then number 6 is about cooperatives serve their members members most effectively and strengthen the movement by working together. And number 7, which you can't see, is one that's really been added by a lot of cooperatives not more recently, I'm not sure since when, but its focus really is on cooperatives working towards sustainable community development and reaching out to communities. So that's number 7. And I wanted you all to see if you could guess what countries they were talking about here. This is a guy, John Thorpe, and he's like one of the lead people in the Leeds Cooperative, which is in the UK. And this is a quote from him. And he says, "They jointly market the fruit both countries produce, and in cooperating in this way, their economic success depends on each other, and they hope this will aid the peace process. What a wonderful example of cooperation in action." Any guesses?
Latin America.
Africa. Middle East? Yeah.
Israel.
Is it Israel?
Israel and Palestine.
Palestine.
You bet. Yeah. So some folks are marketing their fruit together across religious, geographic, historic boundaries there. There's been tons of research on cooperatives, somewhere around 1,000 studies that have been done on different aspects of cooperation in different disciplines too, some about communication, some more broadly in business. But mainly what you see is that it's a really well-kept secret because it's extraordinarily successful when you compare it to competition and individual effort, and especially on these markers of success: productivity, achievement, and problem solving. It ranks really, really high. Corporate and cooperative failure rates are actually 70% versus 10%. So if people start a regular kind of corporate business, that usually within the first year there's a lot of failure, if not within the first 3 years. With co-ops, the failure rate's way less at 10%. That's an interesting thing to think about. He was vice president to Richard Nixon, so this is what he says, though, about, and you know, it's important to think about this because I think this, you know, he represented, certainly at the time, and if not now, he represents the voice of a lot of people who are the dominant voice about what business structures ought to look like and what works and what doesn't work. And they have a lot of power to command, you know, how that ends up looking. So a non-competitive society would represent a bland experience, a waveless sea of non-achievers, a psychological retreat of a person into a cocoon of false security and self-satisfied mediocrity.
Public servant.
What?
Remind us what his fate was as a public servant.
He wasn't a good one. He wasn't a good public servant. Okay, now we're out of there, and we're blasting away on a subway from JFK that's taking us to Brooklyn, and we're going to get off at this exit here at Union Street. So, and this is a little bit of what the neighborhood looks like. Park Slope, a lot of brownstones. I mean, this is a neighborhood that back in the time that the co-op started in 1973, there were all kinds of gang wars still occurring in that neighborhood between people who were Italian and folks who were Puerto Rican. So, and there's been a lot of gentrification in this neighborhood, as there has been in pretty much most neighborhoods. Look at Missoula, north side. And so what's happened is this just, you know, some of my impression is that people have been pushed, people with not as many means are being pushed down closer to the river here in this neighborhood and away from where the Park Slope Co-op is located today, same place it was located then, but the neighborhood's changed. And so, kind of like if you would think of the north side, you know, where beginning professors at the university are now buying homes on the north side, And what's happening to the people who used to live in the north side? Well, they're being pushed somewhere. So that's happened here too. And this is right next door. And this is Fire Squad Company number 1. It's an elite New York City fire department. It's based right at 786 Union Street. It's the neighbor to Park Slope. And it lost 12 of its 27 men at the World Trade Center on September 11th. And so they put up a wooden structure, that's wooden, that memorializes those guys who died that day. And there's all kinds of good neighbor things that have to happen between Park Slope and the fire department. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. It's why they have some people that work out on the street, actually, to try to keep the crowds down from in front of the market, so the fire truck has constant access out of the building. So anyway, that's another shot of the co-op. And a little bit about Park Slope Food Co-op history. Like I said, it started in 1973. Initially, it was a group of people. They met at somebody's house, kind of like, you know, the co-op our co-op got started too. I'm sure it didn't start right where you see it today. And Joe Holtz, who is the founder, one of the founders, said, none of the founders would have described it as a commercial enterprise because we were a group of pretty anti-business people, but we knew we were trying to start an institution. So for the last 25 years, I've been using the word business. But up until then, he didn't even use the word business to describe what they were doing. Here's another thing that Joe said. It grew rapidly in the beginning. Within a few weeks, we had a few hundred people coming here every Saturday to buy food, and we tried to sign those people up. We had a work chart with all the jobs listed for the following week, helping to receive deliveries, helping to run checkout lines or to stock shelves, helping to clean. We tried to explain that this was a cooperative, and we hoped and expected that people would sign up, but it didn't work. People were happy to come and shop, but not to sign up on the chart. So what ended up happening was that they closed 2 times during their first 2 years. And they opened in February of 1973, they closed in October of 73, and because things weren't working. All the people who showed up on the job carried the burden for the people who didn't show up. So they developed a whole bunch of policies about work and signing up, and they went another entire year, and they closed again because that wasn't working. And they decided that they would actually start to enforce the policies. And that's when it started to change. So we're looking at then a year and a half into their venture that they got to the point where they said, you know, this isn't going to work unless we get everybody responsible as a member, everybody working somehow, and we actually enforce those. So for the whole other year beforehand, they had the policies, but they didn't enforce them. So they learned, you know, and that's part of what this whole effort is about, is that you learn and you test the water and you try things out. Right from the very beginning, their main goal was to save money on food. It wasn't about natural, healthy foods. There were already 2 other natural, healthy food stores in the neighborhood. Their mission, their goal, was to provide the least expensive good food to people. And that's been their mission all along, and they've stayed with it. And in my opinion, that's the secret of their success. They have a niche that no one else can ever step into. They could, I think, if they went to a members-only model. There's a real interesting article that Joe Holtz wrote in 2003. I brought it with me here somewhere, and if anybody's interested in finding out where I got access to that, he talks about his concern that co-ops today that aren't working member co-ops are going to lose their edge, because as more and more healthy good food gets into the marketplace, as that becomes less expensive, which it will, as places who can deal in huge quantities can get it in at cheaper prices than smaller places, then what's going to happen? And that's a concern he voiced in 2003 and wrote an article about that, and then talked about how they've addressed that at Park Slope. So something to think about there, because I think other than Park Slope and the Missoula Community Co-op, there's no more than a handful of co-ops, food co-ops in the United States where you have to work to be a member. And I've heard other people say there aren't any other than Park Slope. And I know we are. So, yeah, interesting to think about here.
Is the main mechanism by which they're saving money on food the trade of labor?
It is. 75% of what it costs to run this kind of an operation goes to pay for labor.
My name is Carrie Davis, and C-A-R-Y-D-A-V-I-S. I'm the president of the yet-to-form Bitterroot Food Co-op.
Great. And what brought you to this presentation today?
We have within the last 2 months elected our first board of directors, and all of us are scrambling to find out as much as we can about sort of related co-op experience. I don't think there's any several people have been members of co-ops at other places, but no one has ever had a directorial responsibility.
Gotcha. And what was one thing that really stood out to you as particularly striking or useful about the presentation today?
There were a number of things. The whole notion of having, our co-op is not designed to be members only. So there's a big topic in itself. And I'm intrigued by that. When you're at the startup stage and you're wondering where your capital is going to come from to get everything operational, you look at the labor costs as one of the biggest items. It strikes me, if we shift our focus to think about member labor as opposed to paid staff, that gives us lots more freedom to consider how big an operation we can have. So that's probably the one that I will carry away with for discussion with my board of directors. Trick all our members and say, you remember that contract you signed that said you wouldn't need to work? It's gone.
And just out of curiosity, what made you and the other people in the Bitterroot decide that there was a need for a co-op, or that you wanted to start a co-op?
Well, I'd say the local food issue and food security are two of the highest items. Ravalli County, where we're based, is got one major north-south highway in it, and if the trucks stop rolling, the question is, how do we feed people? I mean, I'm not a doom and gloom scenarist, but it strikes me that if you're going to have a healthy local community, the more self-sustaining it is, the better. Right now, in lots of ways, not just in food, the money is draining out of the county. If you get people who are both producing food and having a co-op that vends the food, you're keeping all that money in the valley. And economically, it would be nice to protect as many jobs and as many economic opportunities as you can.
Yeah. Do you feel like the Missoula co-op provides an interesting model as well as the Park Slope one for what you might try and do in the Bitterroot, or are the needs different?
Oh, I think there's got to be, 70 or 80% overlap in terms of particularly just how recently they have walked through the process. If you talk to folks over at the Bozeman co-op, or I'm sure at Park Slope as well. You know, you're talking about people who have gone through our stage 30 years ago, and to some extent our questions seem naive or maybe irrelevant to what they're facing today. Not that they can't give us some guidance, but the Montana co-op, the Missoula food co-op, is half step ahead of us. So, you know, when we wonder about, you know, well, what should we have on the shelves when we open the store, they've just had to make those decisions. They'll remember quite specifically how they walked through that decision process.
Cool. My final question is kind of a fun one, and it's just, what is your favorite co-op food?
Actually, I don't eat anything but cheeseburgers. Now let me see. I think, again, it's kind of based on local produce, but you know, the vision I have in my mind is this sort of picture-perfect display of fresh vegetables, and you know, everybody, I suspect, has the same reaction to sort of winter tomatoes. It's like, whoa, why would I bother to eat that? And trying to figure, I mean, that's, given that we're in northern Montana, is a real challenge to say how much fresh produce for what portion of the year will we be able to deliver. And so that's both a production, management and delivery system of saying, you know, can we use greenhouses effectively enough that people can have a garden salad in February grown in Montana? And that's a pretty neat concept.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. For sure, there's a general coordinator there, there's a staff person there, and then there's a work crew. And then there are squad leaders. And squad leaders are within the work shift itself. Let's say it's a receiving crew. They're down the basement, they're getting in all the produce, it's coming down conveyor belts, and they've got someone who's slightly got more knowledge than the rest of the members, who could be brand new that day, and that person would bring their crew together and facilitate meetings if they needed to have meetings, bring up concerns, pass around new information, communication. So that person has some set responsibilities as well, and that person is elected by the group, by the shift, the work shift group. And then, of course, there's members, you know, 14,000 of those folks doing various shifts at this place. I'll get into what the shifts are, too. And then another piece of the organizational structure that has persisted over the last 35 years is the general meeting. So there is a general meeting every single month. It goes hand in hand with the board meeting. They have 4 or 5 board members in their structure. The general meeting is a place where, and it's structured, it even has a committee of members that structure the general meeting. Again, we're talking layer upon layer of procedures here. And so these members who are a member of the member committee, they take agendas from people and they actually set up this meeting. And things cannot be proposed anew at a member meeting until there's been a discussion at a member meeting. So there's procedures for how this all works. And it's all based on what they've learned over the years. So there's some good knowledge to mine. The board members really are appointed to listen to what comes out of the general meeting. It's not just coming from board members, their ideas about what to do. It's all generated out of the membership. So policies and thoughts and ideas isn't coming from here. They're accountable to these folks. Does that make sense? Now this I call the hub. It's sort of like Grand Central Station to Park Slope. This is the membership office. You don't see how big it is here. You don't see that along this side are 4 more banks of computers and 4 people at that point working over there fielding phone calls. You don't see that there's a huge bookcase across this whole wall that's got notebooks on every single job shift, and it's got sheets everywhere. I mean, it's like you walk into this room and you could probably take a week in that room just trying to figure out how that all works. But it is central station for sure. This table across here, those are 3 general coordinators who work right there. And there are always 3 coordinators there who help all the other folks in the membership office with any kind of questions that they have. So they're troubleshooters basically. And then other folks, like this woman right here is a member who's doing her shift. She's on the computer, but she's also on the phone, you know, listening to member complaints, talking about what it means to be a member, all kinds of things. Can't make my work shift, dealing with all those kinds of issues. This is the place where you could open up a manual that would give you a job description of every single shift that's available, where you could actually sign up for shifts, and where you could get exemptions to the work requirement, where you pay for your membership, where you get your picture taken. This is a bustling, hustling little place, and there's constant movement going on. And on becoming a member, attending a member orientation, these are basically the 4 steps to become a member there. Deciding on a work slot, paying the joining fee and investment, and getting a membership card. And I went into each of these individually. So for member orientation, and I attended one, and it was really fascinating because it was fascinating to see who else was attending, number one, to hear why they were thinking about joining. And I attended one on a really beautiful day in New York City, and what I heard was that on a beautiful day in New York City, you're not going to get a lot of people at the member orientation. And I checked back in actually on a Saturday when it was really pouring and the whole room was filled with people for the orientation. But so I had 7 people at this orientation, and they were primarily younger people, except for another woman that was probably closer to my age. And these were folks who really were interested in primarily, and it's the biggest issue why people join, is that they're interested in being able to get access to good food at the best possible price, and this is the best price in the area. So that's why they were there. Other folks were, you know, had their little niches around, you know, wanting specific kinds of food, and that was important to them. So that's why they were there. They do 4 orientation sessions per week. They're all done by members. So the woman who did our session had been there 11 years. And it was a PowerPoint slide with some pictures and, you know, different information about the co-op, and then tons of work, paperwork that you could pick up. So they basically addressed what's a co-op, you know, what's the history of Park Slope, why people want to join. And the big draws, again, are price, freshness, and social aspects probably take a third. And what I mean by social aspects is it's sort of like a way to build community, to get involved with other people, that sort of thing, was maybe the third reason, again. And then they talk about how membership works, they stress reliability, and then they do a tour of the facility. And you know, just from my own perspective, one thing that I think I might be inclined to add to this that they don't do is to really talk about some of the challenges for people about this model that they end up dealing with, but they don't necessarily talk about them right here, and the challenges around working and why people leave Park Slope, why it doesn't work. I think I would be inclined to actually get all that on the table right then and there and say, you're making a commitment. You're making a huge commitment to this working model, and therefore, you know, something to think about right now before you join. And there's a quote I've got later on I think is fascinating, and one of the general coordinators told me this, and we'll see it here in a bit, but I'll paraphrase it. And basically what he said was, you know, when people join something like this, they bring with them their way of dealing with the world. So if they bring with them that everybody's out to screw them, then they're bringing that with them here too. And so their way of dealing with the work issue thing can end up being a really horrible thing for them in the long run. So I guess my thing would have been to say, you know, Park Slope doesn't need memberships. I wouldn't say that, but they don't need memberships. So let's have it all on the table here about what some of the issues have been for people and why they leave Park Slope, and to really think about this thoroughly. This is one of many, many charts that you'll see on the wall in the membership office, and we've gone to this system in our co-op. And what it is basically is it's all the weeks of the year, all the months, or all the weeks of the year by months. And so if you look at a month, it would be A week, B week, C week, D week, and then it would go A week, B week, etc. And so when you sign up for a work slot at Park Slope, you're signing up for A week on Monday at the receiving, or A week Monday shopping at a certain time frame. And so think about the complexity of working with a crew of 14,000 people and getting them signed up for various shifts and what that system might look like. And in your mind, come up with the most complex system that you can think of, and I think that's what we've got here. Because it was built as it went. It was built as it went. And there's one guy that I talked to that actually worked in the office at night. They have night office workers who do all the data entry. They don't do any of that during the day. It would be impossible to do it then. So in the evenings, they come in and they do the data entry, and he's a computer programmer. I walked him to his car. I'll get into that, but I walked him to his car and would pick people's brains about how they felt about Park Slope and what they would change if they could change something. And he said as a computer programmer that he thinks he could change that system and make it really efficient and have just one person behind the desk. And I thought, I don't know if that would be possible. Maybe as a computer programmer you could do it. You know, he says the reason I think they don't do that is because they've got 14,000 members and everybody has to work. And so if we eliminated all of that, what would they do? Well, that's a possibility. I don't know. There are tons of ways, like at our co-op too, tons of ways where you can contribute, tons of ways. And so these are actually formalized work shifts with maintenance, shopping, childcare. Actually, walkers are a part of shopping, but I loved it so much I made it in a separate category here. I thought it was great. There's inventory, receiving, processing, stocking, independent office work in the evenings, second floor service desk, and I've got a picture of that I'll show you. Committees galore. There's the environmental committee, sort of like our product committee. There's member governance committee. There's all sorts of ways to get
Disciplinary
involved.
committee.
The what?
Disciplinary committee.
Disciplinary committee. You bet. All kinds. And then there are all these off-site possibilities. And what the off-site possibilities, these go back historically for Park Slope at a time when they were just getting started in the community. And they were doing, I guess in some ways, you know, becoming a part of that neighborhood. And so you can actually do your work hours at the soup kitchen that's 4 blocks away. Or, you know, you could do your work hours at an event that's happening in the community if it's related to food. Or you could do your work hours by helping another food co-op in your neighborhood in Brooklyn get started. I love that. Childcare is a shift, and childcare is provided, it's free. You can leave your child for up to 4 hours in the co-op, but you have to stay in the co-op. It's not so you can go work somewhere down the street or take a subway somewhere else into Manhattan. It's so that you can do your shift and you can shop. And this is one of the jobs that requires training. There's 2 jobs that require training, and it's cashiering and childcare. Entrance workers, 2 entrance workers on duty at all times who are checking people's membership cards. They have to be swiped. As soon as those membership cards are swiped, their picture comes up on the computer and their whole record, basically, that says whether they're active, whether they're suspended, whether they're whatever. It's all keyed into the system. And so I worked the entry door, and so as soon as somebody's stuff came up and it said, I can remember a couple said suspended, and my first response was, well, this says you're suspended. Well, then I had to look and see that they had a 10-day grace period, and they could still shop, or it could have been that somebody else in their family was suspended and they weren't. So anyway, that's how that system works. So that's the first mechanism that would stop people right at the door from shopping if they've been suspended. And the ways to get suspended basically is by not doing your work shifts and by not making up work shifts. One of the things they say is it's always best not to think about what you actually want to do, but when you can do it, because we want you here at that time. One of the worst things that happens, of course, is if you have a shift, let's say, of cashiers, and they don't show up with this kind of volume, boy, you're up the creek. So it's massively important. They would get somebody to come in and take their place, but so all adults in the household, just like ours, must join to use the co-op, and they must work. Although other people in the household can do work for other household members. And they called it the wives club or something, because all these women are doing the work shifts for their husbands. Yeah. And that most work shifts are 2.7 hours. Not all are, but mostly they are. And that the big issue is to trade if they can't attend, and they give you a whole list of what to do about that. There's more paper involved and more rules and policies than you could probably ever imagine. And then there's work shift flexibility with what's called the FTOP program, and that's Future Time Off program. And what that is let's say you can't commit to a specific work time every week because of the way your schedule works, then you could accrue. You can work many, many different shifts. You can go up to the front office and find out where they need somebody, and you can work those shifts, and you can accrue them. You can save them or bank them, and then use them as you go along. You can also get a time off or a leave of absence from the co-op and bank a number of work hours before then, and then come back and get right back into it again. I'm not going to be able to get into all the fine details here. The payment fee is non-refundable, $25, and that's due within the first 4 weeks. All of that would come right up on the computer when you put that card through, that they hadn't paid yet and that they had to pay. And if they hadn't paid, then they would also be not be able to shop. And they have extended payment plans, just like we do. There's a refundable $100 investment, and that's different than ours. It's about the opposite with ours. And the investment is reduced to $10 if you're receiving any kind of services. So, and then every year you have to sort of show them that you're still receiving services, like if you were receiving WIC or food stamps, etc. It would only be $10 to join. And that, like I say, needs to be reconfirmed once a year.
So Maxine, is the $100 the membership fee?
The fee is actually, the fee is the $25.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So that you get
So
back.
that's just in the $100?
$100 is your investment.
Just an investment?
Yeah.
Me for Park Slope, not for us.
Right, not for
yearly
us.
fee?
The refundable $100 is the investment. That's what can be refunded. The
And so if you
25,
decide not to be part of it anymore,
you get your $100 back. You have to request it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you have to ask for it back.
And
Yeah.
that's a one-time?
One time, just like us, yeah. And so you have this photo membership card that's scanned, so that's hugely important. It brings up all your records. That's how they keep track of your work and everything. It's really quite a system. And so they also have, temporary stuff so that you can shop. There's a list by the computer. They have an interesting check cashing policy there. That's something I think we ought to think about. You bank money. Let's say you spend $200 a week in groceries, and you want to be able to go there and write a check. You don't want to carry all that cash with you. They just went to debit cards about 9 months ago.
And they didn't use checks before?
No.
Really?
Well, here's the way they use checks. The way they use checks is I would go in, I would give them $200 that they would put into my account. It's like an investment account too, yeah. And so then I can write a check up to that amount. And the cashiers have a sheet of who can do that. And otherwise, you can't cash a check there.
Interesting.
So if I bounce my check, they got money in my account to cover that. And so makeup, shifting, swapping, they really want you to be accountable, and they want to give you lots of ways where you can, if you can't be there, that it's your responsibility to get somebody else there, that you can swap with other people. The squad leader actually keeps track of that in the attendance book, and so that gets put into your system with all your other account information. And most training happens on the job. When I did the office for 2 days, I actually went through a little training, and it was another member who trained me on how to do it. But there was like a manual about this thick on how to do office that went as far as to say, what you say on the phone when somebody's calling about such and such. I mean, that's how detailed everything is in these manuals. So. And every attempt, this is really their thing. Joe would say this, superheroes hurt a co-op effort. That's what Joe would say. You don't want superheroes. What you want are people who really know how to spread the wealth, people who really can sort of interact with other members, start to build leadership and build capacity as fast as possible, because that's what this is all based on. So.
What's the definition of a superhero?
He'd say a superhero is somebody who takes way too much responsibility for the co-op, shoulders a lot of the burden of the work, doesn't
Doesn't know how to delegate.
Yeah, that kind of thing. This is a processing crew. It's a processing shift. These guys are cutting up cheese, but as you can see along here, there's like, this place is filled with incredible signage, and it has to be. If you think about it, there's got to be instructions somewhere where people put things and how they do stuff. But what I found fascinating was this Hobart thing was all keyed in. So as soon as I told it, it was like cardamom. It came down from the gods that, that it cost so much, and it had already been updated by one of the people who does the buying. And it comes right through the machine, and there you go. I don't know, to me it was sort of like, wow, gods must be smart.
Yeah.
These folks are also required to stock the shelves. I'll tell you what, that was crazy for me. So I made all this cheese, put it in all little packages, and then I found this U-boat kind of thing, which are these big things that you take them upstairs. And so I'm over by the cheese, trying to stock all this cheese. Meanwhile, there's zillions of people around me that are grabbing things and wanting to get in here, but there's constant stocking. It's not like Albertsons where they stock at night or early in the morning. They're stocking all the time. So I'm up there and I'm working meticulously to pull the old cheese up and put it up front and try to get my hands back there and to get that other stuff back there, and I find out later they don't do any facing off on the shelves. They don't have to. It's gone.
Wow.
It's gone so quickly they don't face off. They just put it all in there. Facing off, I learned in grocery store term, how you're supposed to put everything behind it. They don't do that. Anyway, so stocking's happening all day due to the incredible volume. Julie, one of the general coordinators for produce, said they could get in, like, let's say 170 boxes of apples on a Wednesday. They're all gone by Sunday. Here's like a price thing. I found this amazing because we like to buy the really good eggs, the nested, cage-free brown eggs, and they were $1.88 a dozen, organic. And a 3-pound bag of potatoes was $1.06, organic potatoes. And so somebody said, well, wow, isn't the cost of living really high back in New York? Well, I moved to Montana from New York back in the 70s. I was blown away by the high prices of food here. Yeah. And back there at Park Slope, wow, I could eat like a queen. I mean, and there's so many things there that I never even heard of before. So you get introduced to this stuff as that's part of the social thing.
My name is Jack Rowan, R-O-W-A-N, and I am currently a member of the Board of Directors of Missoula Community Co-op.
Cool. And so what brought you to this presentation today?
Well, as a member of the board, I've already talked to Maxine a little bit about her experiences at the Park Sub Co-op. But it's always been in the context of very specific discussions, and so I really wanted to come and participate in this more kind of broad overview of what she learned while she was there. It's also, I've discovered, it's really important because we all have lives that keep going in 800 different directions. The more we can get together to talk about these things and kind of remind ourselves of the principles of what we're really trying to do and what's most important, I think it helps us really to stay focused on those things and not get lost in the details of how to try to get it done today.
Yeah. And what was one thing that stuck out to you particularly or that you found really useful about the presentation today?
I think one thing that I found particularly useful about the presentation today was actually to recognize what's unique about the Park Sub Co-op and what's unique about Missoula. Sorry, this doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but in my head it does. Particularly, the challenges they face in order to try to not be overwhelmed. There's so many members there, and right now in Missoula we're not facing that challenge. On the other hand, I continually found myself thinking, but why we can very easily be in that same position, and what is it that we can do to try to get ourselves to the point where as soon as somebody walks in or moves into a neighborhood, their first thing people ask are, "Are you going to join the co-op?" I think that's pretty amazing. I think actually another thing that really struck out to me too was when Maxine brought up that there is actually some counter movement there too. That there's some people that badmouth the co-op there, and I don't. My first inclination was to say, well, you don't want that to happen. But on the other hand, you can't prevent it from happening, and in a way, it kind of reaffirms how important the co-op is. So, kind of bracing myself for there may be a day where people are bad-mouthing the Missoula Community Co-op, and that's okay. I mean, that'll probably help drive as much membership as it is cause other people to have pause. So.
Cool. And then the last question is just what your favorite thing at the co-op is, your favorite thing to eat, favorite thing to buy.
Do I be honest or do I? My favorite thing to buy is, it's hard to say because I get like cereal and rice milk. I buy in ridiculous quantities because that's what I love. But I also especially we've started carrying Santa Cruz sparkling limeade, and I've become addicted to that. Oh, it's incredible. So I think that's what it is.
Cool. Thank you so much.
And signage everywhere. This is where this goes. This is where this goes. Put the things here. Put this there. Again. And you have to consider, too, that if you worked every single shift that you were supposed to in a whole year, that still wouldn't total out to 40 hours. So if you think of your first week on a job somewhere as a trainee is when you learn the most, well, spread that out over 12 months. So there's got to be all kinds of instructions, all kinds of ways that general coordinators manage that. It's pretty intense. More storage stuff downstairs and where to put it, how to put it there, and wow. This one, Eric wanted me to take her picture because she had on this t-shirt that said Country Girl with a horse on it. And Eric had spent time in South Dakota, and he was a Puerto Rican man that was on that ship. And so He just loved that t-shirt. So, and so she's putting stickies on the lemons to say that these are organic and the other conventional ones aren't. So that's part of what she's doing for her shift. And there were 3 other people around the table, and they're all, that's what they're doing, is putting stickies on lemons. So, yeah. And talking, chatting, listening to music, yeah, having a good time. Eric, again, he liked having his picture taken. Okay, this is where all the checkers are. So checkers are different than cashiers. So there's like 10 checkers here. And the checkers are totaling up everything. And then you as a shopper have to put it all in your bags, okay? And they don't have any plastic there. And then from there, you go to the cashier with your, unless you do debit. Now if you do debit, you're done, and you go to the exit worker who checks to see if you've paid. So there's all kinds of what some folks would call surveillance. And there are cameras down in here too, and I'll sort of shoot on that here in a minute, and there's reasons for it. But a lot of members, again, if you're working less than 40 hours a week in a whole year, you're not going to know all the ins and outs of how this functions. You might not know why there are surveillance cameras. You might just think it's like all this scrutiny, right? It's not. And I know the story, so. But anyway, so this is the area where folks are going through the checkers, and then they're going to walk through to the cashiers back here and pay, and then out through over here where they'll go by the exit
Would you
workers.
say again what it is that's being done before you go to a cashier? I'm not sure if I get what that step is all about.
They're actually ringing up everything so that you get a total.
Oh, I
And
see. It's
cashier just takes the
what we
money.
think of as, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
Why do they do it that way?
Yeah, they ask why they do it that way too, but primarily it's so there's only 3 people who have the money who are having to check out and do all of that. That's one reason. So there's 3 places where there's actually money in the store. There aren't 13.
I think it makes perfect sense.
It does make perfect
It's
sense.
more efficient, even though it
Yeah.
doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
It helps with the
When you think about
It
it.
does help with the
Oh
flow.
my God.
There's also someone, this is the shopping shift duty, and there's also someone who stands on a step stool for this shift, who actually watches the line and asks people to move. That's what their duty is. Now, ever since the very beginning of Park Slope, it's been noted for its long lines. On a Sunday in Park Slope, remember the buildings? There's like 3 buildings that are connected. That line can snake all the way from this area of the store, which is one end, all the way over to produce, which is like 3 stores over, and all across all those aisles. And that's why they call their bi-monthly paper the line waiter. Because there are huge lines here. Anyway, so one person's just in charge of making sure people get in line and stay in line. And
Do they barcode everything?
yeah. Yep. Again, that's looking toward the front where the checkers are actually. And then this serves an important function, this desk. This is the 2nd floor service desk right outside of the membership office. It used to be that the people that were the entrance workers downstairs had to also take back bottles for refunds. They had to give you parking validations, and what they saw happening was that as someone was caught up, an entrance worker was caught up in doing that, people were slipping through. And so they changed it. Now if you want to return bottles, you have to go upstairs to return them. If you want parking validated, you have to do that. So they've had to create these systems, some of it for surveillance and some because they're getting ripped off incredibly with groceries. And so they had to do it. I call it walkers and waiters, but there's a walker in the yellow and orange there, and those folks are waiting. They could be waiting for a cab, but some of them are waiting to have a walker come and take them to their car. They put signs everywhere on everything. It's like there's no shortage of labeling, and everything is labeled with country of origin. And if it's close to being organic, they'll let you know that too, that they haven't been certified, but this is how it's grown. And I started creating a new word, and I called it InReach. I kind of like it. I hope it catches on. And what do you think? In-reach and outreach, okay? So when we're thinking about this kind of a model, I think we're talking about doing a lot of in-reaching and also some community outreaching. But here's what they do for community service and community goodwill. The CHIPS program is the soup kitchen where they will bring food, things that are ready to go, they bring them there. They do composting. They bought all the composting equipment at all the gardens, the neighborhood gardens in the Park Slope area. So any excess stuff that's gone, they're going to bring it there to the composters. And they donate members' time at community events. That's their work shift. And they've got like a huge meeting room, which I have a picture of, and they're hosting all kinds of presentations and events and discussions and workshops. So they're really this community hub for all kinds of networking and resources that's pretty intense. There's a community garden right down the street, actually. This is Jerry. And Jerry has been a long-time member, and he and I went to the CHIPS program and delivered some food there one day and talked a lot. And there's the CHIPS program, Community Soup Kitchen. And this is their kitchen and meeting area. This isn't an open commercial kitchen. That's just for the co-op itself, for events and for people who want to cook their lunch, although there is a staff kitchen too somewhere. And then this was the last of these guys are laughing because they know. This was the last of the plastic water bottles right when I was there at Park Slope. The membership voted against plastic water bottles. So
It took like 2.5 years.
things move slowly.
Was the issue more the plastic or just why are people buying water?
It was a space issue, but it was about the environmental issues that had to do with plastic.
So did they do any alternatives like fill your own bulk water?
They actually put up some signs, which I couldn't find, but it had to do with, drink the tap water. And then they started selling these canteens.
Oh.
Yeah.
And water purifiers, but
Yeah,
the tap water in New York is actually pretty good.
Yeah, it is one of the cleanest water
Yeah.
supplies of
Uh-huh.
major cities.
And then this is the stairway looking, that you go up to the second floor to the membership, but this is me looking down, and along the walls is plastered with all kinds of announcements and workshops and can you do this, this is for sale, blah, blah. It's great. And then leadership and membership, and this is Joe Holtz, who started one of the founders back in 1973. And some words of wisdom from Joe. Superheroes undermine getting members involved. Got to spread the responsibility to get members involved. And have to move to one-stop shopping as fast as possible so that people can get everything that they need there. That space availability often...
Would you go over what that means? Move to one-stop shopping?
Move to being a place where people can buy everything that they need for their groceries. Like our co-op right now, for example, isn't a one-stop shopping place. We don't have everything that people would need. Therefore, they have to go to a number of other places besides us. So he said the quicker that you can move to being a place where you can provide everything for your shopper so they don't have to go to 3 other grocery stores, the better off you'll be.
And they have focused strictly on food? Or do they have other secondary?
They do. They have vitamins, they have health goods, just like we do, you know, and they have gift wrap and cards and bags.
I saw some of that packaging and stuff, so.
Yeah, some things, but not, not utensils. They do have beer now. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Yeah, and then focus, and it's been their focus from the very beginning, is on low-cost affordability principles. That's the niche that Joe feels that people ought to be looking at. And then provide the kind of inventory members want. You know, find out what members want and provide it. And then he never fails when there's ever an issue. This is what I really like about this guy. He is so grounded in the cooperative principles that whenever something happens, he goes back to those principles to resolve whatever the issue is.
It's the power, almost the same power as a mission statement.
It is, yeah.
Value,
Yeah.
principle base.
Value base. His value base is unshakable. I said this to him. He corrected me really quickly. I said, you know, this model, this member-only model, I said, if it can work anywhere, it can work in Missoula, Montana. And he just looked me square in the face and he said, it can work anywhere. It can work anywhere. And so then I had to think about that. And he's right. It can work anywhere. So, anyway.
Some of the stuff that they're working on, there's some work with co-ops, the bakeries over in the Portland area and Seattle area. They do a lot of conflict resolution training. Do they do a lot of this?
They do training. They train, squad leaders can go to training to learn how to put together a better group process. Their general coordinators really are crisis intervention people, and they have crisis intervention training. This is human services work.
My name is Terry Roberts, and it's TerriRoberts.
And what brought you here today to come see presentation?
Well, I came today because I'm a big supporter and fan of the Missoula Community Food Co-op, and I happen to be a board member and was here involved in helping plan it and actually organize it and be a part of getting the food together, getting a camera person to actually videotape, and because I wanted to learn more about the Park Slope Cooperative and that co-op that we have modeled our little Missoula co-op after, and come up with some new ideas to make us more effective.
And what was the most useful thing that you gleaned from the presentation today?
The most useful thing I think that I will take away from today was less during the presentation, but more during the member meeting afterwards, and just hearing some member voices and their concerns with our co-op and the direction we're taking, and their concerns with the actual model that we have chosen through Park Slope. So that was good information. I don't think it's anything that we can't address, but it's also good to know that the concerns of our memberships, those people who are in our ranks, what they're saying is, oh, I don't like this because, and I heard a lot of that today, and I also heard some really cool positive things that we're doing that we need to also keep doing more of.
What's your biggest hope for the future of the co-op?
Well, I guess, I don't think that we want to be exactly what Park Slope is. I think that they're a wonderful model. I like the idea of an all-member run cooperative. My goal, and I suppose there's some personal reasons for it, is that we will offer a low-cost cooperative store for people to come shop and be able to provide for their families without taking such a high percentage out of their take-home pay.
Cool. And my last question is, what is your favorite co-op food?
We made hummus! I guess I would have to say that really and truly, it's probably not one food, but I love the fact that we have so many bulk items, and that's what I buy the most of is the bulk products.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
That what we just talked about a minute ago, you need to be really good at relationships and communication to be able to work there. You really do. You need that kind of training, I think. And then the system can seem redundant or inefficient. Again, there's something else that moved up on my thing, but in actuality, redundancy might be really good, and inefficiency might be we need to even rethink why we use that kind of a word to describe our labor. I just think we have to reorient to how we think about these things. And then, this one was one I told you about before. People are prone to deal with the co-op like they deal with the rest of the world, although the values of the co-op and modes of practice are entirely different. Some people come in expecting to be screwed, and they find themselves being screwed. You know?
Yeah.
That's the way that plays out. And then this person, this was an amazing conversation too, this one woman. She says, I've been on the job for 7 years. She's a general coordinator for receiving. And I didn't like my job at first because every day, every shift, I had to keep repeating the same things over and over. I mean, think 5 shifts of people in the course of a day, all of whom you've got to say the same thing to. Some may have been there 10 years. Somebody, it might be their first shift. She said, then I finally realized this is my job, to educate and to start from the basics. Once she figured that out, it was fine. Took her a while. Didn't take her 7 years. She's been there 7 years. The system is amazingly, incredibly inefficient. I'm a software programmer by trade. This is the guy I told you about. I think I could get the membership system to function with one person behind a computer. I don't know. I'm still...
You know what I find remarkable about that is that the lack of, if you are rotating 10 times what a normal store does, how can you call that inefficient? Because it is so addressing the mission of getting food out to people.
Right. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
It's doing it quite well.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's what Joe was, someone did a retort to this article that he wrote in 2003, the people that are head of the Cooperative grocery. And they retorted to Joe's article because they said Park Slope is exclusive. It's exclusive because it doesn't let everybody shop there. And his response was, isn't it exclusive if you can't offer prices to people that allows them to shop at no matter what income level they are at?
That's right.
So,
It seems to me too, this concept of efficiency or inefficiency is a very sort of capitalist-driven model.
It is.
And if you're looking for community, that also disappears.
yeah, that word would sort of go somewhere else and it would be replaced by something else, absolutely, yeah. These are the surveillance monitors. That's from Joe's office, actually. And I could tell you stories, we don't have time, but people have been able to get away with, before that system, false bottom boxes and carry away lots of groceries. So members or not, there are thefts and thousands of dollars of food went out the door. So that's there for that reason, but it's also there to see if things are flowing right, like especially in the shopping area. If they need to call in more people, if the squad leader perhaps isn't on top of it and calling. I mean, Joe would say this, there are good squad leaders and there are obnoxious squad leaders and there are all kinds of people, but you have to work with all of that. I mean, you just, so there's some surveillance. There are space constraints, incredible space constraints. My first reaction when I shopped there was, there's no room to move. It felt like I don't have time to just sort of, you know, look at this over here and take my time. I've got to kind of keep it moving around. It's so busy. And again, if you shop at certain times, it's not. But there's the line waiters. I wrote some things about that. But, you know, basically, in response to your earlier question, you know, it provides a time where people can communicate with one another too. And people, it's like this guy, I think he's probably reading a book. I mean, he's accustomed to it. He's going to bring his book with him to wait in the line. If he has to shop at that specific time, which is real busy, 2:30 on in the afternoon, 3:30 on, it's crazy. Sundays are nuts. Everybody shops, I guess, in New York on Sundays. Huh?
No, they just don't take receiving on Sunday.
Oh gosh, that's what it was. Yeah, more line waiters, there's people hanging out, sneaking around all the different columns there. This I found online, I thought this was interesting, and I called it competition, kind of. And this is an actual car that was parked in the neighborhood, and what it says is, quit the food co-op, buy this car, and drive to Fairway, which is a competitor, kind of. They don't see it as a competitor. Fairway would see them as a competitor that moved in not far away from Park Slope, which provides, you know, organic, etc., big parking lot. It's in Red Hook. And I talked to this woman whose husband wanted them to quit the co-op. I walked into their car, big controversy between this couple. And she said, I'm not leaving the co-op. This is small. I know exactly what I see. I know where my foods all come from. I'm not going to shop at Fairway. So
That's like a chain?
it's a chain. Well, it's a local chain now. There's like 4 or 5 of them in New York City. So anyway, that was the joke here. Buy this car and drive to Fairway. A little competition. So, you know, we're right at the end here. I've only got a few more slides, but this is information I found too from the National Cooperative Business Association, and I think that there'd be a lot of things on here that Joe would agree with. That anyway, what they say basically is that when you're selecting a board of directors, that you have to be really careful that these are people that support the principles. Like, let's say you are going to be a member run, which again, that doesn't happen very often, but you would want to work with people on your board to have them understand what that all means, so that you've got support, because you're doing something that's really very hard. And if you've got contention in that area, it's going to be tough. And then members who join but never use their co-op, they would say would be a problem. Members who...
I'm not sure if I get why that's a problem. I mean, it seems sad somehow, but...
Well, I mean, I can think of a number of reasons why that might not be great. Especially if you're trying to do a working model, you wouldn't, I don't know how you can't pull it off. You've got to have people who are there working and using it, buying the groceries. So it's really about getting as many, you know, you have members, but you want them in there shopping. You want them, that's how you're going to support yourself, is by members purchasing. So,
Maxine, one example of that is several producer co-ops, value-added co-ops, that during the down years, co-ops are really attractive. So they join. You know, they're thinking, okay, I'm going to get into a new marketplace, and they commit their production or livestock, and then when things get good, they don't support it.
yeah.
And so it's part of those two combined, the responsibility of being part of a co-op, but then those that use it, but then they quit using it because all of a sudden prices got better again.
Yeah.
And it's been a real problem in producer co-ops.
Uh-huh.
Another thing that is really on this whole model that's really intriguing is the most successful natural beef co-op is Oregon Natural Beef, and it's this general membership.
Whoa.
They operate on general membership. And then the board of directors is this small body that is totally all the policy, all the decisions. And if you can imagine a room with 100 producers sitting around a round table, and that is how they make their decisions and set their policies. And they're hugely successful because I think because of that factor and also the responsibility. Every single producer has to, on an annual basis, go to so many stores and market their product. Have to be a member.
Yeah.
Or you're not a member. So it's kind of some pieces here that are really marrying, that are really kind of intriguing.
Yeah. So yeah, and the other piece that this, as Jan says, ties into that, members who use cooperatives but fail to take responsibility, members who never ask questions and who let a few persons make policy. That's another huge issue. Lack of consistent member education about problems cooperatives face and the challenges they must meet. Yeah, I don't think I realized till pulling this all together how much education really is necessary and why. And then not supporting the cooperative with enough risk capital. I mean, It's a no-brainer. And then other reasons are low-cost management. What that really means is that you ought to reframe this and think about paying good price for good management. In other words, it's a fallacy to think that you can get good management at a really, really low price, that you've got to support this and sustain it. It's like they do it at Park Slope with their general coordinators. They're managers, all of them. And they're paying them well because they know as soon as they walk out the door, they take all that history with them. And they take all that knowledge with them. And it's not easy to gain it. So, and then not addressing and dealing with cliques and special interest groups. You know, something else that really just comes home to me about this kind of a process, and I taught group work and community work, but this is a huge group work process. And you have to be mindful about how to do a group process well and effectively. And so part of doing a good, effective group work process is making sure that things are on the table and that you have a process where you can deal with the conflicts instead of them being sort of subverted off to the side somewhere. So it's important. It's just good group work. So lack of transparency about the facts of the co-op, good and bad. You know, that it's got to be out front with members about what's happening. And then errors in financial policy, failing to teach cooperative principles, management errors such as inadequate inventory, poor location, poorly conducted meetings, neglected appearance of the co-op, etc. So those are some of the things that historically people have noted that have really contributed to the demise of many co-ops. But there are a number of things that really support why they thrive. And again, attending to what the members need and want, and being willing to continually change. Because these are growing, organic kinds of processes that do evolve. And that, you know, cooperatives that are financed by the members thrive. It means everybody's got their hands in on it, some ownership, and then using all major fixed assets at the 75% level or more. And I bet you Park Slopes at the 95% level on that one. They gotta be. I mean, they've gotta be, in terms of how they're using space, it's pretty astonishing. $5,800 per square foot per year compared to the industry average, which is $600. Whew. Okay, so that's huge. And that I think, oh, maybe it's not there yet. Members who do the majority of their business with the co-op, low administrative and overhead costs, and that I think you get by having members, as many members, all your members working. And then more individualized and specialized services. Again, more Park Slope stuff that I see coming through here. You know, they have yoga, they have all these workshops that are happening. They have childcare for free. They walk you to your car. They meet your needs. What?
It's probably also to keep the grocery carts out.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, it really is. But they, you know, they didn't start it that long ago. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And more reasons for success. Maintaining an open line of communication with members, selecting and developing a quality management team, placing more emphasis on electing business-oriented directors, developing and implementing a systematic method of cooperative education for members, and always being positioned for changes in operations, markets, and member needs. That's our neon sign.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Could you just say your full name and spell it?
It's Kate Keller, Katekeller.
Great.
Yeah.
And your position with the co-op?
Coordinator.
Cool.
Yeah.
So first of all, just how did you get involved with the co-op, and how did that start for you?
I got involved with the co-op when they were hiring, the North Missoula Community Development Corporation was hiring a
full-time Vista position to help run what was then a buying club out of their little office over on the north side. And I took that position in July of 2005. So it's now been 3 years that I've been doing it. And so the second year was funded by a local donor, and this year I've been paid by the co-op. So there's been grant funds and other whatnot paying me. But I came to the co-op out of a passion for nutrition and a passion for food in general. I've spent a couple of summers working on various farms, one in Western Washington, working at the vineyard up in the Rattlesnake, one in northern New Mexico, and it all kind of congealed here in this setting because of not only the commitment to local foods and nutrition and access to whole foods, but the sheer the democracy and the participation and the whole mission of the co-op, having everyone involved in that. So it's been experimental ever since.
Cool. And what are some of your first memories of the beginnings of the co-op?
I remember walking, in particular in this space, I remember walking into the building and finding that there was a running shower in this room, and it had created a whole bunch of mildew problems, and we tore out walls, and we tore out, this has been a freight warehouse for however long, and it's filthy and disgusting and soot coated, and so we were like, we have our work cut out for us. And Eric Hansen, who was involved at the time and was on the board, had just said, well, we'll just tear out this wall, and we'll just take out this wall, and we'll just put in sinks here. And it was like kind of a magical thing that somebody had the vision to be able to, and the knowledge to be able to take out walls and move things around and create this space that, amazingly enough, as small and simple as it is right now, was like so not suited for what we're doing here. So it was, that first day that we had a work party that we started tearing stuff out really was such a moving experience to have so many people just like, let's do this. And it's been like that ever since. Like there's this constant, people rallying around these projects, the walls coming down, stuff moving, this mural is happening. It's kind of, it's pretty amazing. And all of my favorite experiences, all of the most memorable experiences are when major progress takes place because of how many people are involved. So
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Switching gears back to sort of Maxine's presentation,
Mm-hmm.
what do you feel like was the thing from her presentation that that struck you the hardest, or that you really want to walk away with, that you found most useful?
I think ever since Maxine came back from Park Slope, what really finally came home again was this mission and this knowledge that we can do this, that this is the way to do this. This is, everybody working together towards a common goal. This is the only way that we're going to do this. And that's what's like so exciting, because it's unshakable, that notion. Like the cooperation is totally unshakable. You can't argue against it. And so that's the most exciting thing, is like if you have all of these people on board contributing just a little, it's just many hands make light work. And so And so unlike so many other situations in our society, there are nobody gets a better deal than anybody else, and it's like there isn't any special treatment of anybody else, because if you start treating some people with some sort of favoritism, then other people are losing out. And so it's just like this theme of egalitarianism and equality and participation. It's absolutely infallible from a philosophical standpoint, and where the rubber actually meets the road, it's truly fascinating. And it may not be the most efficient, and it's not easy for sure, but it's absolutely the way that we need to, I feel like it's the way we need to work together. It's the way we need to run this place. So it's exciting to have that rejuvenated. So
and how do you feel like, I feel like that really ties in with the members only model that she was talking about. So what is, in light of that, why do you think the members only working co-op model works so well here?
I think it is working now, and it will work amazingly because there are incredible people in Missoula, and that there are incredible people everywhere. And I think when you I believe that we are living in a society where people are looking for community, in the sense that they're looking for purpose in their life. They're looking for we are looking for a connection with our food. We're looking for a reattachment to culture in association with our food, and I feel like I think that the co-op is a perfect place for that, because of what everybody can contribute. Being a member of the co-op, not just in the sheer work hours, but in terms of ideas, in terms of creativity, in terms of beauty that can come out of so many different kinds of people interacting. I think that's why it is a perfect thing for Missoula.
Cool.
So, yeah.
My last question is just, what is your favorite co-op food?
It's kind of really hard, and it's kind of really simple. The bulk dark chocolate chips are always going to be my favorite food. But yeah, I can leave it at that. But I'm a vegetable lover, so next to the chocolate, the veggies.
Cool. Thank you.
In reach.
We are a worker model co-op where you do have to do the shift.
You're finding that more people want to support it, sign up, pay their membership, but not necessarily drive all the way.
Yeah, some of that. And we've got now that we've got our doors open and we're starting to get a sense of how this all works, I think we're starting to shore up the structures to figure out how that's all working. There's lots of opportunities to do work at this point on various committees in the store itself. There's facilities, operations committee, outreach committee.
There's so much to do.
But I made a goof here, and your hand was up, and then I got sidetracked, but you had a question.
I'm just wondering how they keep up their produce in the winter, because here it's kind of hard in the winter to get produce.
That's a good question. In New York State, I know New York State, I grew up there, especially upstate New York, there's no way you're growing anything there. It's like 300 inches of snow. It's pretty cold and crazy, but they're getting produce from other places as well. So they're getting shipments in from all over the place. So I imagine they just get less of certain things, and they don't have the access to it in the winter as they do in the summer, so. They have like some incredible people doing produce, that if you wanted to go and work with them, I was just thinking this Al Zimmerman guy and Julie, they're just shopping stuff all the time. And another thing I have to say about Joe Holtz, what he did at the very beginning, and I said how it tied in with my own relatives, well, Joe was actually got a pickup truck and he would go and buy the produce at 3 o'clock in the morning to get the best prices for the co-op. He would bring in the produce himself and do the wheeling and dealing that it took to get the best price for the members. And when I talked to him about our issues and about price issues and things like that, he just kept saying, well, aren't there any places that you can go where you could get, you know, some good prices and bring it in yourself? Why are you going through the middle people? Because to get the better price, you're going to have to do that. And I just kept thinking, wow, this is exactly what my dad did. My dad was a grower, a distributor, and a buyer. And so this is what he did too. But so, you know, that's some of Joe's recommendations, but he doesn't know our context very well. I think the next thing I'd like to do is get him out here, though.
Yeah.
Leslie, go ahead.
Well, so he moved from that, and now obviously he's not doing that anymore.
He's not. No, they've got all kinds of.
But they're able to, since they do so much volume now, still keep those prices
Way
low.
Yeah.
Even though they're buying it from a distributor.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the woman.
Yeah, I was just wondering along with her question, whether they have any relationships with the producers that, you know, would encourage them to have longer term storage or whatever, you know, for things that, so that the co-op could have more local things. That's intriguing to me here, you know, that if, you know.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting question to ask, you know, because that certainly is one way to address it, is to provide storage for the producers. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Jack?
There's the Engler family owns a couple of farms outside of Whitehall, and they're trying to build a whole series of hothouses that are going to be heated with spent cooking grease and wind turbines. But you know, going back to the question of risk capital, one of their biggest questions is, you know, having an outlet for that produce that they're producing. So the more things like cooperatives and you know, local markets can help to, you know, make a commitment to them that they're going to have a market, the more we can build that to where we can try to carry, you know, at least some produce year round. That's all local.
You know, that scenario with Joe going and picking up the produce, there's some opportunities here with the Western Montana growers in providing some resources that could lower their produce price.
Working on farmers and such.
No, storage. It's a huge issue for them in Missoula. I mean, so what is that table to table, this cooperative talking to that cooperative, on what are your needs, what are our needs, and how we can collaborate, which will affect the bottom line. Because in this early stage, what Joe did was he implemented some cost savings before the labor cost savings came in.
That's right.
And that's what you need to do in this early stage. You need to kind of look at the plate and say, what are the cost savings we can do now? And as we build, we bring our labor on, we can buy from the distributors, because now we can afford to, because we have this labor force that's replacing that cost that used to be there. So but I think there's just an amazing ability, same with the Bitterroot group. It's a lot of Bitterroot farmers that we have a unique opportunity here in this area in Western Montana because of the diversity of growing, the ability to extend seasons, it's all there, and then the relationships that are in place, which is probably the most important. It's really, really exciting.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of relationships to carve out that could help us at this stage.
Absolutely. You guys aren't a bunch of strangers.
No.
Well, just on the cost end too, Maxine, maybe you could just touch on the difference between that markup that they're doing at Park Slope versus the traditional grocery store.
Well, traditionally, you know, correct me, this is at least what I learned, is that mostly grocery stores are somewhere, and it depends upon the product too, but somewhere in the average of 40 to 50% markup. Am I correct with that? And so markup is about buying. I don't even know that I want to go here because I'm just beginning to understand this, and margin is about selling. It's the kind of, what you make is the margin. But so Park Slope is at 21%, which is, I don't know what Walmart is. I'm trying to think of the least expensive place, but because they do such incredible volume, but it's pretty unheard of to have 21%. So now I don't know what more I can say about that.
Well, just the fact that basically food comes in the door and it gets marked up a certain amount.
Yeah.
If you were to look at that on an income statement, the margin might be different from that.
The margin is different than that.
From your sales versus profit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about buying is the markup. And then the other thing that they do at Park Slope, which I think is an interesting practice, I, again, don't know grocery stuff that well, but they do, before they do the markup, they increase, for example, let's say you have a bushel of apples, so I'm going to put 50 cents on that for shrink. And what I mean by that is for logs. And so already I'm going to increase the price that I'm saying I bought this box of apples for, and then I'm going to add 21% on it for markup.
They do that instead of working with margins at all. They just do markups, right?
Yeah.
And that's
margins. They do margins. They report out as margins.
Yeah.
Everything they report out on their sheets are about margins, because that, the way Joe looks at that, my little lesson from him was that markup is about the buying, and margins is about selling, and about what you've made, and what's your margin at the end. Yeah. But, you know, I'm thinking maybe one more question, then we ought to just wrap this up and go eat and have another meeting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so what I've been wondering as I sit here is one of the points, or I guess the main point for the Park Slope Co-op was to organize around selling food as cheaply as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that would work in New York City, but I don't see how a co-op can hope to compete with Costco or Walmart on a cost basis, or even just regular grocery stores with loss leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just thinking, why wouldn't it be more organic, more true to our purpose to have our main cause be to support local agriculture and to develop community with costs being, you know, manageable for the members.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of opinions about that or thoughts on that it'd probably be way easier, I think, maybe to do that. It's not as easy to find these ways of providing low cost.
Well, that was kind of like your point. What Joe was saying is that he had this vision of the members would work, and that's how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, that's how.
But you have to do volume, I think, to make that work. You have to do volume. You know, somebody said to me last week or so, well, but they've got 14,000 members, you know, and I kept thinking to myself, 14,000 members, that's not hard to do, I don't think, in the long run. 7,000 in Missoula. 7,000.
It's 50% of the people who live in Ravalli County.
It is, in Ravalli County. But I mean, we could probably get more members too, that's the other thing, and have more people working, so. But you know, I don't, personally, I don't know how to respond to that. But.
One of the things in the bidder group that seems to ring very strongly with people we're doing outreach to is that whole notion of the money staying in the valley. People see this exodus of cash going out to
that's
Costco
what I'm
versus.
thinking would be more appealing. At least it would appeal more to me than low cost.
Yeah. And that is a community perspective of saying, I got to help you for you to stay around and be able to help me.
I'd say, why can't we do both?
Yeah. I really believe that there's kind of an illusion that nutritious local food is expensive I think that if we did kind of an analysis of that, we would find that it probably is pretty reasonably priced in comparison to the cheaper stores when you start looking at the value of the food, number one. And then number two is you start implementing some of these systematic, cost-saving labor, what distribution was the beginning one. That's quite obvious. He removed distribution. That was a huge cost. To be able to just get into those already existing price brackets that are maybe a little lower, but you're never going to be the Costco and Walmart. And I think there's a lot of people who want to be, who want to support that, because you look at the buying practices that they do, and it's hostage buying practices. I mean, it's just destructive. They're on a short-term route. Let's just put it that way. You can only be able to do that for so long until your supplier is going to disappear, go broke, or maybe they'll figure out that they want to sell to co-ops. You know, who don't hold them hostage.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that whole sustainable.
Well, I know. Kate has one, but I'm wondering, you know, how's everybody feeling about getting this wrapped up?
Well, I'm going downstairs when they're not wood benches.
Okay, sound good? We can carry on our discussion, or did you have something?
Oh, no, I was just gonna respond to Patricia's by saying it's actually once Max came back from Park Slope and we made the decision that we were going to do this straight across the board markup, that ultimately it was going to be the most affordable on everything, and we are the most affordable on everything. Every item that we choose to carry at regular price is going to be less than anywhere else unless it's on sale elsewhere. You know, so because we're not buying from the major corporations. Those products that we carry have all been really selected due to their ethics and social responsibility, environmental impact, and otherwise. And so what we are in our primary, and I think across the board our members said that the price was the least important of their values there, and local being was the most important. But focusing on the kinds of relationships that we are in locally and have built locally thus far will be the most important. But across the board, we will have the best prices, especially as we build volume on the things that we do choose to carry. So,
and then, I think it's also important to note that we're very well aware that a lot of the people who got involved in the co-op to this point are because they believe in changing our food systems. But we're also sat right in the middle of a very low-income neighborhood, and we don't have as much buy-in from that neighborhood as we'd like to see. And so, one avenue that we'd like to see to bring in that neighborhood is to whatever we can do to keep our prices as low as possible, because we know a lot of families are having to make decisions based purely on that. So we want to make sure that we don't just respond to the existing membership and not respond to the membership that we want to build as well. So it is always trying to bring those two together.
Right. The co-op, just another quick announcement, got 2 MSW level practicum students, so they'll be starting at the end of August. They'll be donating 30 hours of work to this co-op and doing outreach into the neighborhood and such. So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Okay, everybody, I think it's time to